Hello and welcome to the Philippines. Today we're going to talk about risks in the Philippines and a little bit around the world. I've found a number of sites with maps and information, and I'm going to start off at the Pagasa site here in the Philippines, a government site. They track tropical storms and such and weather. And here we're looking at, and let me switch back over to, we're looking at track of tropical storm Ramon. Kalamagi is the international name, and this little rectangular box here is the Philippine area of responsibility. And for some reason, Philippines always changes the international name to a different name, which sometimes confuses the issue. But anyway, here we are in November, and it is the 13th presently, and we're tracking this typhoon, and they generally come off the Pacific over here, and they come across here, and they usually go north. They usually turn north, but not always. Occasionally, one will come down here to Mindanao. This is Cebu down here in Bohol. 2013, a big one, Typhoon Yolanda came through here, did a lot of damage on Bohol and the northern third of Cebu Island, as well as all these other islands, Samar and Leyte. And anyway, these are the projected times in the path that the storm will take. And we are getting, even down here, that is drawing in. This is not showing the full extent of the storm. We are getting cloud cover, and we'll probably get a little bit of rain off and on the next couple of days because of this. These low pressure systems suck in. High pressure pushes out, low pressure sucks in. And the storms, tropical storms, typhoons are low pressure systems. And Pagasa offers quite a bit of information on what's happening here. These storms can turn. They're always not predictable, and I've seen them turn back out into the ocean and then come back a little later, go north, go south, and there are a lot of factors that factor in there. Factors factor in. Makes sense. And they give some warnings to different types of areas, especially this can affect sea travel. With all these islands, we have ferries and thousands and thousands of more ferries transporting people and goods to the various islands, and it certainly will affect sea ferry traffic in parts of the Philippines. So if you're traveling by ferry, that could affect your travel plans. Can also affect the airlines, them taking off and where they're going. I know the last typhoon that came up went up towards Japan, and flights into Japan were canceled for a day or two. All right, boys and girls, I don't want to scare you, but here's the Philippines. And I'm going to click on this up here. I already did. And historical tropical cyclones that made landfall in the Philippines between January 1966 and December 2016. And let's take a look at those. Now, these are just the ones that made landfall. So there were a lot more that did not make landfall that went north of the Philippines. So it gives you an idea. Since 1966, it's a lot of years in there. And one nice thing about this, I can scroll in. I thought maybe that if I place my marker on one of these little lines, it would tell me which typhoon it was, but it won't do that. Now here is Cebu, island Cebu City right in here. And in 2015, I stayed up very, very late to the wee hours in the morning, like 3 a.m., because we had typhoons coming across here, and I wanted to see the storm. I wanted to experience it. And it was virtually nothing because these outer islands as many of you know, if you've been around hurricanes in the Gulf Coast or southeast USA, when they hit land, they lose a lot of their power. And I have experienced many thunderstorms since then that were much greater intensity than what I experienced at that point in time. This is the NOAA website, Nationwide Operational Assessment of Hazards, and it really is pretty neat over here. You can check the weather, you can check sensors, flooding, landslides, storm surge, earthquakes. In fact, let's just hit on earthquakes, and it gives us a number of options here. Phil Volks. Let's go with Phil Volks. I believe Phil Volks has a more sensors, more accurate sensors than the U.S. Geological Survey does. And what do we have here? Phil Volks. This is an earthquake. Apparently these red dots are earthquakes. And maybe I need to get out of drop. Okay, got out of that. Had to go back and click on that to get out of that. Okay, so let's go over here again. And these earthquakes, I'm not sure what the time period is, but we've been getting a slew of them in the last month, last couple of weeks especially, down in this area down here. Destroyed a lot of buildings, a lot of schools, and being under a 7. Buildings in the Philippines are supposed to be built to withstand up to magnitude 8 earthquakes, and it's obvious from the various earthquakes that have happened in different places that many buildings are not built to those standards. This is Bohol here, so kind of in the south, the mid western side there. And I don't know if I click on my, okay, it will tell me when it was. A 3.4, which is quite small, and it gives you the area that it happened in. This one here is west of San Fernando, just south of Cebu. What was it? 1.7, so many people would never feel that. And I have felt an earthquake that happened over here in the Surigao area, and one that happened here. I felt, I think, 3 earthquakes, but they've always happened, and I felt one that happened up in this area, up in Leyte. So I've gone over to earthquakes. I finally got rid of my by coming over here and putting my slider all the way here. I was able to get rid of the earthquakes. Now here you can the red ones are active volcanoes, and you can click, put your marker over there, and yeah, you can. I just did it. Okay. Put your marker and it will give you some information, the name of the volcano, the historical eruptions, the latest activity. Well, that's Mount Pinatubo. I just had it up a second ago to make sure it worked. And this one here is Mayon, I think. No. 1642 was the last one, and this one here is Mayon. My own volcano, and it last went off January 2018. And let's move down here. Some of these are sensitive to the click and others aren't. Okay, this is Canaleon here. You can also go over here and hit potentially active volcanoes as well as inactive volcanoes. So let's just hit that and see what happens. They come up as yellow. And looking at a few more maps here, risk to projected rainfall change, and that's based on climate models. There's some major issues with climate models, and although there's a lot of data known and more data all the time, there is still a lot that is not known. And in fact, just recently, a lot of the climate modeling people are finally starting to add the influence of the sun. I think were using the sun's influence at about 2%, something like that. And there are more and more data coming out, and in fact, China and Italy, I think, have sent up spacecraft to study more and more the electromagnetic influences that the sun has on the Earth, and as it does other planets too. Other planets' climate is changing, even though no man is living on those planets as far as we know. Anyway, take this all with a grain of salt, but it's interesting, especially being someone like myself who's interested in the geophysical sciences and climate and weather. But there's so much that isn't known, so take it all with a grain of salt. Projected rainfall change. There's so much that we don't know about the oceans and how it affects that. So anyway, that's a video for another time, and probably by somebody who knows a lot more about it than I do. But there again is a map, and this is projected years out, I think. So they really aren't very good at projecting even the length of the weather patterns year to year. And it's kind of we start projecting as we see things happening in the near future. Risk to typhoons. Okay, here again is very interesting. Northern Luzon, southeastern Luzon, eastern Visayas, of course, because the almost all the typhoons come across the Pacific. Not all. There are some that come from the west, but seldom. So Cagayan, this area up here, as I've said before, these typhoons, low pressure systems that turn into cyclones and typhoons, come across here, often turning north. So this whole area here is at risk, and then they have some that occasionally come in from this direction. And I think most of these are, I think all of these are all of this region here. And going down here, northern Samar up here, northern Samar, they're again coming in from the Pacific. Pampanga, La Union, part of the Metro Manila area. Somebody might, Masbate, Tarlac, up in Luzon, western Samar and western Samar up here. And you can see that these other islands, even Palawan over here, Bohol, Cebu, Negros and Panay Island up here. The northern part might get. Got a friend who lives up here in Rojas. Hello, Lawrence. Risk to El Nino. Induced drought. And we have in 2015, when I first came here, August 2015, we were in the middle of a drought, El Nino induced drought, and this past year, 2019, we were in the middle of a El Nino induced drought. And top 20 provinces that are risk of these: Sulu down here, Island, and Lanao del Sur, Lanao del Norte, these areas in here. Going down, so a lot of South Mindanao, a lot of Mindanao is subject to that. Siquijor, again, this island here. Tawi Tawi, that's back over in here, I think. Negros Oriental, up here. Camigan, island here. Davao del Norte, not sure exact, but this area in here, I think. And Bohol, even recently, I think last month I even read that there were areas of eastern Bohol that were still having issues with water. Some days they didn't have water and had to be shipped in. So even here in Cebu City, there are parts of the city that the plan is to drill many, many more deep wells. Part of the problem with drilling deep wells over the long term is that you suck water out of the groundwater, and it slowly, the seawater creeps in and you start getting salty water in your groundwater. And then here's the combined risks, and then they've added them all up. And there again, it's interesting chart, and this is using a very broad brush to paint these areas, but it's interesting for what it is. So let's look at some more maps. These maps, risk maps, come from a website called observatory.ph, geophysical maps, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Go down here. First of all, we're talking about earthquakes, and since '68 has recorded 12 destructive earthquakes, including the 1990 July 16th Luzon quake. To the map. Top 10 provinces that are at risk of earthquakes. Surigao del Norte, which is Surigao del Norte, I believe this area up here. La Union, which is the area it is in the Metro Manila area. Benguet is up in this region here. Pangasinan, right around in here. Pampanga, also in this area, north of Metro Manila. Tarlac, Ifugao, Davao Oriental. Davao Oriental. Here's Davao here, so it would be this area, perhaps over here. Not positive there. And it has additional information about deep focused ones, the Manila Trench and the Philippine Trench for Davao Oriental and Surigao del Sur areas. You can read the additional information there if you want. Earthquake-induced landslides. Of course, landslides come from a number of reasons. They can come from earthquakes, they can come from rains, they can come from just instability in the sides of hills and mountains. Most of the provinces except Palawan are susceptible to landslide hazards. The top 10 provinces. There again, this is kind of a broad brush, and it really depends on where you're at. If you're on flat ground, very unlikely you're going to have a landslide. Now, you might find a sinkhole. They find sinkholes in, for instance, Florida relatively often, where water underneath the earth is one of the reasons that you'll get a sinkhole. And there's a map of landslide areas induced by earthquakes, and here's Cebu is there also, but it's mountainous, a lot of mountains, and a relatively narrow, flatter coastline through much of the land. Up here it's flatter and farmland. But obviously, if you're on the side of a mountain and there's an earthquake, there's a good chance that you're going to have an issue with a landslide. Volcanic eruptions. Philippines lies in the ring of fire, as does much of the Pacific. And volcanoes are not present in some areas, so Camigan, John, John, a vlogger down here on Camigan Island. He threw a dart one day. He was wondering where to live, and he threw a dart, and the dart hit Camigan Island. I think they have, he'll correct me very quickly, 8 volcanoes. They have more volcanoes on that island than they do municipalities. And he said, hey, I want to live dangerously. I'm going to go to the island with the most volcanoes. Camigan, Sulu, these areas down here, which are closer to Indonesia. And you'll find that Indonesia has more volcanoes going off regularly, and also earthquakes than almost any place on Earth. Bilar Albay, Bataan, Sorsogon, which again is up on Luzon, South Cotabato, this area down here, Laguna up by the Metro Manila area, and this area up here is where Mount Pinatubo is, and many other volcanic mountains up in that way. Camarines Sur over in this area, Batanes, which is these islands up here, Batanes Islands, however you pronounce that. And they also get typhoons coming. A lot of the typhoons that come across here go north, and they will get at least brushed, if not hit pretty hard. And they've also had a number of earthquakes up there as well, which has devastated some of the buildings in that very popular tourist area. Tsunamis, something you don't hear too much about in the Philippines, but there are risk levels here. I've taken motorbikes around the islands. There are areas that say talk about storm surges. It's more in line with typhoons. But Sulu down here, this area down here, there again, Tawi also down here. One of these is Sulu, one is Tawi. Basilan, Batanes up there again north. Guimaras Island, which is this island right here, right off of Iloilo, over here. Romblon, Siquijor Island. I've been to Siquijor Island. That's here's Dumaguete here. This is Cebu City here. This is Siquijor Island, the mysterious island. Surigao del Norte. This area of northern Mindanao is Surigao City here, Surigao Island. I believe this is Surigao Island, famous for the surfing area over here as the Pacific waves come in. And Camigan again is listed. It's not colored here, but Camigan, and then Masbate. I believe this is Masbate here. Combined risk to geophysical disasters. It looks like none of us are going to have much of a chance in the end. Anyway, there again, combined risks. It really depends on where you're at in these areas. These maps are painting a very, 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 very broad picture. And it's like covering the whole Midwest and saying, this is high risk for tornadoes. Well, that's true, but tornadoes don't hit most of those areas most of the time. Same thing with hurricanes in the U.S. Yes, Florida, the east coast of the U.S., the Gulf Coast, they're at high risk, but most years they don't get hit by the major typhoons. Now here's an interesting site that I came across, Hazard Hunter PH, and you can type that into a search bar and that should come up. That website, and it is, I believe it is put together by Pagasa. You can look at a number of different things. You can select your hazards: seismic, earthquake, active faults, fissures, earthquake-induced landslides, liquefaction, tsunamis, active volcanoes, potentially active volcanoes, inactive volcanoes, number, not sure what this stuff is. I should know, but I don't. And over here on the map, you can zoom in. You can move the map around, and so you can zoom into those areas. I have those yellow volcanoes are potentially active, and I put that in there. Now these are just the active ones. In my opinion, potentially active is probably something of interest to anybody planning on moving into an area long term. Anyway, let's zoom in here. We do have a lot of active volcanoes. That doesn't mean they're going off any given time. For instance, which one up here? One of these up here. I think this one here. I think, yeah, Mayon has been spewing some ash recently, and I know that Canleon, I think that's Canleon, yeah, Canleon, last year there were some hikers up there, some Asian hikers, and they lost contact with them, and it was spewing out some ash. And there was some concern, and it turned out they just didn't have cell signal up there. And what do we have up here? Not sure. But it's also showing us the fault zones. And you'll notice that Leyte over here has one going through the center. And over here on Panay Island, you've got Bohol. Here's Bohol, where 2013 they had a earthquake, and I think it was centered right over in here someplace, like a 7.2, and it also shook Cebu City pretty good. Very little damage in Cebu City. There were a number of old churches around Bohol Island that were damaged, and I'm not sure if this is the fault zone. I presume that's what that is. Those little triangles there, I'm not sure what they denote versus these dashed lines here. But you'll notice, and then here's some black lines here. So I have not found the code to tell me exactly what that information is. And you can even use current location, and then you can use coordinates to find it, or you can just do what I'm doing. You can zoom into the area. Makes common sense to a lot of people. If any place you have a mountain range, you probably have some potential faults, earthquake faults. You look if, let's go down here, Dumaguete, real popular, and doesn't show anything right here. But it is not an exact science, so just because they don't show something doesn't mean that the Earth isn't going to open up someday here, or America, or Europe, or Asia, or any place in the world. Let's just, out of curiosity, let's go up here to closer to Manila area. And you'll see not only this is why Luzon, especially the eastern side, ranks high for risk, is because you've got earthquake faults here. It's sitting right on the edge of a couple major Pacific faults, and you've got the earthquake faults, trenches, I should say Pacific trenches. And then the Batanes Islands, which basically are a group of volcanic islands. Anyway, those are 4 useful websites that I've found in the past. I've even found some websites where you can zero in on areas to check for potential hazards, and I haven't found them this time. So, you know, these websites keep changing and evolving. But anyway, there's a lot of information from the government and even other private companies to offer you those types of things, information. So thank you for watching. Please like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Certainly don't be scared away from the Philippines. There are risks any place in the world, and you just make some educated decisions about those areas. And it is important to be a little bit informed about the different areas. So safe travels to you all, and I'll see you next time.